So we'll start the briefing. First agenda item is the forward agenda. Any?
Yeah, I just had a couple of comments just on the council reports segment. There were two items that I'm sure for good reasons didn't actually come up today and they're listed. One was the waste recycling, which I know will come up in January, no doubt. And then the Brenda Road ceiling contractual support thing. So just an amendment to the forward agenda.
Sorry, they were late.
Yeah.
They were pulled late.
Yeah.
So we'll adjust that.
Yeah, no worries.
They were on the agenda. If no other comments on the forward agenda, welcome to Dawn and Nat. We're here to talk about the community grants procedure and the community grants policy.
Okay, thank you everyone. So you would have received the policy and the procedure, and I did a bit of an update form for you all to sort of go through what the changes are. So first of all, we've made a change to the actual application form, which I didn't give out because it's an operational form, but that has been updated and we're moving away from the SurveyMonkey function because we have had a lot of feedback about that not being a friendly form. So we've gone back to a Word document which we've made fillable. So that will be, I think, a really good change for the community this next round.
I'll just put in there.
Yes.
Can you save it?
Yes.
Good.
Yes. Yeah. And you can, happy start, so you don't have to do
Yeah.
all at once.
No,
That
this
was,
is the other way you
yeah,
put in, you can never have
Yeah.
a copy of what you did or.
no,
So,
so that's why we made the change for that feedback. Do you want me to go through all the clauses where we've made changes, or has everyone read them?
By exception.
Yeah, if anyone has questions, I think.
Yeah. So has anyone got any questions? Is there anything you'd like to know from what we've done?
I think it's great that you've listened to feedback from the community. Thank you. And I'm just reading the last ones just to remind myself, but I think all of the ones I've read so far are really great. It just shows that you're listening to your community. And I think the next, feedback from the community will be really positive. So we like that.
Good. Well, if there's no questions, we will.
There was the other bit that came up at the last, like, when we did the final process. Like Jeff and I declared an interest, which when you added the scores up, worked out to.
So that was, so that will just be a form change, just to make sure that that doesn't
Yeah,
happen.
because they
So just
did.
that
The
addition-
two that were.
Yeah.
Conflicts. Didn't add up equally much the other.
Yeah, so we'll rectify that with the form.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not actually a change within the policy or procedure though, yeah.
To have an average score.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good. Any further questions? Feedback? Well done, team.
Quick presentation. It's a good presentation.
I like that. Next off.
But it does show that when you've done the work and you've provided it in advance, and
Yeah.
rather than going through it. Thank you, Nat. Thank you, Dawn.
Thanks.
So the next item on the agenda is open space and public realm policy and open space contribution policy. And we welcome Nick, planner, today to work that through. So you've been provided a copy of the draft policy for both in advance. So hand over to Gary.
I'll start off first of all. So Nick was working on the open space in terms of the contribution under the PDI Act, and part of the process of the conversations that we've been having as a chamber, and even today, around the sale of land, community land. One of the things was to sort of say, what's the future use of land going forward, and how it would be determined. So using sort of today's example, I suppose, in terms of the Caton parcel, if that was then to be retained by council, how would we provide ongoing management and direction for its future use? So this policy effectively provides high-level principles to which council administration can use to determine how community land, council land could operate going forward. So it's very much, as I said, very much high principle delivered. It will be used when either Dave or myself, in terms of the master planning exercises around, for instance, with the RTP project that we have, that we will provide this as a guide to the consultants so that when they do consider their master planning and around public realm and open space within townships and the like, that these were some of the principles that would be used to develop that master plan. Equally, when the infrastructure and field services team are maintaining and developing open space, that this policy will also help guide some of the general directions around it. And finally, back to the community land management plans as they are reviewed in terms of the maintenance of open space. This policy will also help guide how those community land management plans are developed going forward. So it's very high principle for that reason, to give guidance to the way we operate going forward. I'll take any questions on that part of it. We hand over to Nick.
Any questions for Gary? No? Hand over to you, Nick.
Thank you. So yes, the open space contributions policy is a slight adaptation of what exists already within the Planning, Development and Infrastructure Act. So under the Act, if you're doing a land division that's over a certain amount of allotments being 20, and some of those allotments are relatively small in size, there's a requirement for either a financial contribution to council for open space or dedication of some land to the council, or a mix of both if that suits better. So it's very dependent on whether council would be accepting of public space being invested to us as part of a division, or whether the developer wants to do a monetary contribution if there's adequate public space available, and that could be better utilised by council. The policy that exists within the PDI Act is lacking in some areas. It just has a percentage of land that should be contributed and isn't that clear as to what that should look like. You know, that can be something that council can refuse to have vested to us, so it wouldn't count. But especially in negotiations with developers, this policy would allow for us to have a little bit more clarity as to what we'd expect. So ultimately the purpose is to have something clear saying that we need this land to be open and accessible. We wouldn't accept land that's on a significant incline, or that's tucked away in a corner, only accessible by a path. And it should be suitable for the intended purpose, and it should be in a form consistent with the allotment layout. So we wouldn't be expecting to see anything like a Garden City layout, like what's in Candlelight Gardens, where you've got these parks that are sort of tucked away behind houses that you don't really know are there. The intention is for it to be open, public, and just have a little bit of clarity when we go down with developments. That's the purpose of this policy.
So any other questions? So draft policy was provided.
Yeah, but just, there's always been a contribution, has there, by developers to a fund that council owns?
Yes, so we're on the old system, it was the 12.5% contribution if they did private open space.
And used for the same purpose.
That's that, yes.
So, so my question is on that, it's 12.5% of land or financial contribution,
Right.
so it's the same.
And as Nick's pointed out, sometimes there'd be a variation to that, so they might provide some open space to provide some contribution.
A mix of both, like 8% land and make up the difference in financial contribution or whatever, okay.
And also that,
I was going to say it's also going to be contextual to where the development's occurring, because we've got some towns that it would be, you know, that we've got adequate public space or public space that's potentially dilapidated or underused, that a financial contribution might be better for the developer because they can retain more land for them by, you know, not having to give 12.5% of the land away. But helping a wider town, that's going to help them sell one if they've got, they can show off with a nice new parking town with the money that they've contributed.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to necessarily be on their land, so they then contribute to help make the parks better in the community outside of.
but what we go around to is that where the open space is provided and often becomes a council asset. So this is where part of the negotiation is. So that's why, you know, in some respects, the two policies sit in tandem now as well, because in terms of we are going to accept open space, than the expectations of quality open space. Because some developers will put their drainage reserve as part of their 12.5%, which doesn't make it actually usable by anybody.
Yeah.
And so by having the secondary policy sitting alongside the contribution policy, we can actually say, well, no, we want meaningful open space. We want it as a playground reserve, et cetera, community garden. So this gives us a little bit more, ability to negotiate with the developer as to the type of open space we actually want their subdivision.
Yeah.
So that's also the purpose of it saying open and accessible, although wording may change. But, for example, we've had some developments where they said, this is our drainage reserve, we're going to fence the whole thing, but it's technically open space because it's, birds can come in and there's water and it looks nice. It's like, well, yeah, but is it accessible? Is it usable? Can you get a kayak in there and pedal around? No. So it's not, it's not really doing what the policy intends.
But what about the ongoing cost? Somebody gives you 12.5%
Well,
land.
that's the part of the conversation piece between the developer and council as to what percentage of council is willing to take. Because it might be that, there's suitable open space within proximity to the subdivision, in which case we may be willing to not accept no open space as part of that land division. Alternatively, it may be a location that has no public open space and council is therefore willing to provide a park for the benefit of the community. So that's the negotiation that we can go through.
Because let's say Truro, if it happened tomorrow and we know we've got this master plan ready and they want to do that, and that means we have that park, Pioneer Park, Heroes Park. We don't need any more parks in Truro, but we need some maintenance money or to help with that playground.
So that's where that negotiation is.
Yeah.
And by having those master plans as well, it's going to assist us then working out with these two policies as to what we're willing to accept as a council going forward.
I look forward to the policies.
Should there be a distinguish, I was like, should there be a distinguishing thing between like major development like Truro or say the Crossing versus someone who's just getting like 2 house blocks and they're putting in maybe 4 small townhouses on those 2 house blocks? This is only for major.
It's just the land division.
Land division of
greater than 20
or more.
20 allotments.
20 allotments, okay, so I probably did say that, I'm sorry, I didn't remember reading that part. Okay, so yeah, this is for large allotment, we have a whole different plan for smaller development.
To give you an example there, what's the land division taken?
1 into 70, or 1 into 80.
1 into 80. So that's sort of where this sort of policy would come into play. And if we see future, land division within Manor, Morgan, within the areas that are zoned appropriately, then we would use this policy to guide, how open space we provide.
So the new section brings a paddle steamer, and that's got about 50, 60 homes on it, so they'd be expected to do something there.
Yes, but that was previously approved under the old act, but it's things like paddle steamer, things like Hinton, it's those bigger developments that are going to occur. And I also just note that council always has the option to refuse to have land vested to council. So, this gives us negotiating power, but we ultimately have the say to say, we don't want this land, it's not usable. And the developer is the one that has to work out what's going to be acceptable.
Yeah, I think it's really good because I know that we get a lot of all family stuff vested to us, and sometimes it's not up to a standard, and then we get it and it all falls apart after we get it. So having that. This is only to do with open space and that. Do we have a similar sort of policy about the road, like so with the new developments when we get vested a road that the road is a fit for purpose with drainage and anything like that?
So-
Do you think you can get?
So Nick and I and Jared, we were having some conversations. I thought maybe we can incorporate that into this policy, but we opted to keep it clean and just leave it open space for now. Having said that, because under the PDI Act, there's meant to be the new design standards, which will set out infrastructure requirements. Now, we're still waiting on the Commission to develop those design standards. At the moment, the only one that they've addressed is crossovers. And so with the rollout of the new legislation, they obviously focused on some of the higher level strategic elements of the system. So those design standards are sort of obviously a bit behind, but those things will be addressing crossovers, lighting, other infrastructure.
I think we're starting to
And then
come
ultimately,
down.
again, Dave and I, in terms of, there's an opportunity for council to have its own design standards as part of the development negotiation.
I think we've got an active motion still from last term about a
Bonding
policy
policy.
on bonding.
The question I had, again, another one, in regards to delegating spaces for those open spaces within these large developments, where we have established native vegetation or, you know, historic old growth forest areas that could, or remnant bush, scrub bush that could be on these larger sites. Is there any way that we could have within our policies, I guess, sort of like a lenience towards those areas being utilised, where there is already existing vegetation on these properties to be what forms our open space plan for those developments? You know, just to make sure we protect those little areas that could already be an established park with a bit more extra understory, which already has some native trees. That would be where we'd, you know, would hope in a large development, they would see those trees and be like, well, that's where our open space percentage is going to come into play, as opposed to thinking, well, we may not have any more need for parks, but we do have a need to maintain our native landscapes to some degree.
So I think in that context, that's been part of the negotiation with the developer. The new policy 472 talks about heritage identity as one of the criteria. So if there is an expanse of native vegetation on a large parcel, then part of the land division discussions in terms of feedback around would be around retaining as much of that landscape as possible, potentially with part of 4.5%.
I'll also note that the development application process for the land division does have some implied incentives to retain the native vegetation.
Yeah.
So if they're not removing any native vegetation, they're keeping it on the open space lot, then that makes it a lot easier for them because they don't have to get clearance approval, which is often one of the most expensive parts of bringing an application in. And it also potentially could lead to some complexities, given that land division also has to take into account topography and stormwater drainage and things like that. It may be extremely difficult if we had something that says you have to retain native vegetation, not that it necessarily has to be that strict. They may not be able to adequately provide for their stormwater if that's the only reasonable place for them to direct stormwater to, if it's the lowest level, but definitely something we can consider.
All right, any other questions or comments? Thank you, Nick and Gary. So it gives you some, well, guidance. So the policies will come back to council at the appropriate time with the council report.
Yep.
If nothing else, no, thank you, Nick. We'll close the briefing agenda there.